Let's just dump the whole thing on there.
There we go. 3, 2, 1, clap. 3, 2, 1, clap. 3, 2, 1, clap. 3, 2, 1, clap. Sorry, everybody. You got to have the syncing the audio on the video version. You got to see how the fudge was packed. So
nobody wants to know how your fudge got packed.
Hey, this is a professional show, Jared.
Professional show.
Yeah, we're the kind of show that if we don't like you, we'll ban you from our Facebook page.
Oh my gosh! Not even if you just hint around something.
We won't do anything else like productive towards like podcasting. We'll put out really optimal like nationals and really shitty stages. But by gosh, we are the GM at blocking you off the USPSA Facebook page.
The GM of the I felt so left out that people were getting banned. I had to make a comment at 11 o'clock at night, so I got banned. I was like, listen, if I wake up and I'm not banned.
You got blocked too?
Oh yeah, blocked? Yeah, I got blocked. I said
my man.
We should create a new rule that if you win a division and McManus doesn't like you, they should be able to DQ you, remove your certs, and we'll call it the Yee-Min Lin rule. And for some reason they took offense to that. Let's talk about. We were talking about Costco. We were talking about liquid IV flavors that are not at Costco. I would like to hear the opinions on this. This is very important to this podcaster.
My wife bought some random liquid IV flavors directly from Liquid IV. They had all sorts of random stuff. They had pina colada. They had all these fancy flavors. They had with vitamins. They had with caffeine. They had a green tea one. They had all sorts of crap. And Costco's just like, lemon, orange.
No, they got lemon, orange, that green stuff that's caffeine-y. I don't know.
I think strawberry.
The ginger, strawberry.
All you need is orange. Now. All you need is orange.
Look, here's the deal. If you get it from Costco.
Now they have yuzu pineapple.
That's actually real good. That's real good.
And it was on sale.
Yeah. You from there. How many's in that package?
24.
Yeah, you get that for $22.
See, this is the type of quality you don't get on primary and secondary.
This is true.
Yeah. Anyway, this episode is brought to you by the Walther PDP, the most custom pistol that's not custom that you can get anywhere. It's right here in my hand.
Guaranteed to be a suboptimal experience for everybody involved.
Are you still trying to sell that?
I am not at. It is up for sale. I am indifferent if I sell it. Like, it's a nice pistol. It's a good pistol. I don't care if it sells or not.
I will say, if anyone out there is looking for an M&P metal, I have one. No, and I need to sell it.
Do not buy it from him. I literally told him, do not buy that gun. He bought it a day and a half later. He's trying to sell it. Nope, let him stew.
What about a SIG X Macro?
Let him stew.
Wait, is this a steel frame 2.0?
Yeah, aluminum technically.
Let me look at it when I come up for Utah State.
No, don't.
Deal.
It's trash. Anyways, oh shit, I gotta come up with intros. Welcome to the PARAcast. I'm your host, Amos the Boss Hernandez. Joining me tonight, it wasn't the first time his hands were in the wrong starting position. It's Robert Wyatt.
Hey, she didn't have a problem with it that time.
No, he didn't. And yesterday was 7-Eleven, and he was the only person trespassed for putting his mouth under the Slurpee machine. It's Jared Stepp.
Oh, shit.
First of all, they give us free Slurpees, so I didn't do anything wrong.
Well, it's because they mistake you for ice, and they think you're gonna deport them.
You're gonna take.
I don't think you've been to a 7-Eleven recently.
I think you're gonna take the clip to Guatemala.
I don't think Robert's ever been to a 7-Eleven in his life. Mexicans don't work at 7-Eleven.
Mexicans,
that's right. It's Apu.
Well, Indians don't work there either way. We've literally meth heads are doing the jobs Americans just won't do.
No. The owners are always hotels.
The owners are. The people who work the counter are just white meth heads now. It's sad. If if you don't have a kidney disease or a meth addiction, you can't work at 7-Eleven. And the first guy in USPSA history to be Yee-Min is Yee-Min Lin.
Gentlemen,
Welcome back, sir.
there can be only one.
You've achieved the achievement of having policy written after you.
It's like Lou.
Nice.
It's like Lou Gehrig's. You know the coincidence of Lou Gehrig getting Lou Gehrig's disease. Like, how the hell does that happen? Well, like one in
that
a
was
million.
just a strange coincidence.
One
Hey,
in a million.
I'm waiting for my badge on the USPSA member portal.
Ooh.
Ooh, yeah, I'd be down with that.
Ex-president.
You've unlocked it.
Article 15 president.
Hey, you know what? That actually, I mean, in all seriousness, that actually brings up a really good point. Why don't, instead of like the stupid gay ass badges that like these gamer tag crap things, why don't they do cool things like, this many years since I was blocked off the USPSA Facebook page, this many times that Troy threatened to DQ me for putting Tanfo Timmy stickers on the porta potty. Those are badges that people would like be proud of. They'd post that crap on their Instagram.
Yeah, it's like standing up in front of a tank during Tiananmen Square. You know, you gotta get that one guy's. Yeah, that's what you do. Anyways, welcome to a special episode of Wednesday episode of the PARAcast. Not so often we get to do this. Yesterday we got a cow died in someone's living room. It sounded like right there. So we got a little email asking. Here's the email from yesterday. And remember, all emails that are officially from USPSA are just, you read them and you know the crack fucking squad that's behind those emails.
I guarantee you. I mean, the director of marketing. I mean, that dude.
I can't.
He's got an A+.
I can't read anything that goes on that website now like it means any part of any sort of gravitas or actual professionalism that goes on the back. But anyway, dear USPSA member, we are continually striving to enhance your USPSA experience. Your feedback becomes invaluable. Literally.
This sounds like a fraud thing.
We have devised a series of surveys focused on equipment used across our various divisions, and we need your input. Your perspective and experiences can play a significant role in shaping the future direction of the USPSA divisions. Whether you are a seasoned competitive shooter or a newcomer, your opinion is important to us. This is literally as I'm being removed from the Facebook page. These surveys will cover topics like production and division capacity, discuss whether any changes are needed to Limited 10, including potential allowances for optics. The Limited Optics survey focuses specifically on the firearms and gear that members are currently using. This is an opportunity for you to help us understand the needs of our community better and ensure our rules and guidelines remain relevant and supportive for all competitors. Click the link. Survey takes no more than 5 minutes. Thank you for your continued support and active engagement in our community. We look forward for your participation in these surveys and to further improving the USPSA experience.
This really does sound like a phishing attempt. Like, I would flag that and send it to my IT department if I got that email.
Oh yeah,
Mm-hmm.
it's like this is the IRS. We're trying to get a hold of you about the super refund. You actually won the super refund lotto. So you click on this and it'll take you to the link and you'll get asked, I think, 3 different surveys and 3 different questions of what will be brought up. One will be the production division one, which I took first, which was question 1. Should production stay at a 10-round capacity? Yes or no? Question 2, should production division be moved up to a 15-round capacity? And then question 3, how is it worded? Did you guys remember how it was worded? It was basically
It talks about production, basically mat capacity as long as it fits the box.
yes.
Yeah, restrict the capacity for production division based on firearm and empty magazine dimensions. Evaluate the feasibility of enforceability of such a restriction. Blah 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 blah.
Yeah, and so let's talk about this. Well, how
Yee-Min, I mean I thought the fun thing of having Yee-Min on, I mean, because you were involved in the initial of all this stuff, and so I thought it'd be interesting to like hear your perspective on how some of this stuff came about and the rationalization for it.
Well, the survey timing, yes. I mean, I know how it's worded. It could be taken a particular way, but that was something that was going to be coming out later on this year anyway. So if you want to look at the original context, the January in-person board meeting minutes. So that was when we first published the other results of the initial survey that came out. And we were going to basically send up follow-up surveys to basically refine some of the equipment changes. With production in particular, there's been some questions I've seen on Facebook that say, hey, why can't we just, do certain things in production or do certain things within carry optics and just blend limited optics back in? And the primary restriction is because of bylaw 16.2. Bylaw 16.2 basically says any equipment change to an existing division has to go through a very lengthy process. That is a direct result of what happened the last time the production rule changes occurred. So, remember back in the day where we said, hey, you can put flashlights and do all sorts of, a carry appendix and all that stuff.
Basically,
and that was
build this gun without an optic on it, basically.
correct. And that was something that was done, I think, what was it, 2021? And it just sort of popped out there. And I think I remember at the time, for those of us that were, diehard production people, it was, where did this come from?
Why you do this?
Yeah.
Pretty much. I mean, I think history has demonstrated, I think the history subsequently has demonstrated that, the whole putting flashlights on wasn't this
game changer. This
apocalyptic impact.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, that and functionally, I mean, did it really bring anybody? Did it bring the people into the game that it claimed it was going to bring into it? Is the question. Because that was the big selling point. There are all these people all these tactical guys and cops that would shoot
can't
this
wait
if they
to
could
get
only
in.
have they could only have flashlights.
That's what everybody always told me. I'd come shoot USPSA, but they won't let me shoot with my flashlight in this division that I wouldn't even be competing in.
Yeah.
Hashtag sarcasm.
Yeah. Well, and that's always the question. I mean, is the surveys at least an on the face attempt to try and get member opinion, or is this just a way that the organization is doing something to placate the members?
No, realistically, it is an opportunity to get input. I mean, the original member surveys that were sent out at the end of November, December, when these changes were first being discussed. I mean, that information was brought up. Every board member is going to have the opportunity to not only look at the survey results, but also look at individual comments. Which, if I remember correctly, there is no comment section like there was last time.
No, there's not.
Yeah. Why? I wonder why they didn't do that this time.
That is a question for the board and the director of marketing. But there was a link. So every area director in USPSA has a separate portal that they can go to. So when these surveys are presented and once it's done and it's collated by the director of IT, you can actually look at the survey results. You can look at the percentages of who did what. And with the original survey.
Why is the director of IT getting these emails?
No, it wasn't the emails, but the director of IT basically is the one that's actually,
collating the data of the survey,
collating the data and presenting it.
Oh,
So
okay,
in the original, right? So in the original survey, you could freeform, responses and comments. So any comment that was presented, area directors and board members, including myself, could actually click on it, look at all the responses, and you could actually mark, hey, I actually read these responses. So again, survey data is only as good as what you can receive, but it is part of it was a part of the discussion in terms of, hey, do we continue on with this? Is this the right thing? Is this what, are we genuinely moving in the right direction? So, I mean, the surveys started off, it was something that came up last year, during the, some of the other shenanigery that happened. And it is legitimately a good faith attempt to try to get a reading on the pulse of the membership for various things that the organization wants to do.
And that's fair.
Well, what's the response rate on this type of stuff?
Pretty minimal. I mean, I think something like 10 to 15%.
Oof.
Again, this is all off my memory, so I'm sure somebody's going to fact check me on this, but it was not a significant, we're not talking like 60, 70, 80% participation.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, if you look at the production rules alone, right? I mean, production is really what, 10%? Yeah, about 10% of activity participation right now. Most of the guys that are shooting production that moved over to carry optics, production, you're going to get some diehards. that perhaps weigh in on this.
Well, yeah, I mean, you'll get like, I mean, I am certain Tyler Turner, Ben Berry. I mean, those dudes are all hardcore prod guys, and they're going to have an opinion, which, interestingly enough, I mean, I'm just thinking about this out loud, but I would think that Ben Berry's and Tyler Turner's opinion should count for much more than, say, like Jared Stepp, who that's all they ever shoot. Because I mean, that's what they shoot. They live and die in that division. And so the people that are arguably in that division and have been actively shooting it, their opinion should mean more. But we're sending this out, and functionally anybody can make a response on it. And I'm not saying that as a put down to you, Jared. I'm just using that as an example.
So it's like you should have sent this email to only those USPSA members who are classified in production.
Yeah.
Well, to be fair, I mean, the survey is also somewhat self-selecting, right? I mean, if you see it's about production rules, there's nothing that said you actually had to answer all 3 surveys.
Well, and I think the counter argument would be to that is that if you're taking the survey you're basically taking the survey to tell USPSA what you would like to see in these divisions that might increase participation. The whole point is to increase the participation. So if you have a hand-selected set of diehards that might have a view that would hold it or keep it less in a spot that people will participate in. So I think it's having the general membership open it up to what they feel like they would use to participate in. Now, that being said, I don't think the Runaway Kid's coming back as an adult back to production and limited 10, but
no, and I mean, and that's always the challenge. I mean, and Tommy, you do bring up a really good point, where you have all these people that are, I mean, the gun Amish that are like, I like iron sights and I don't like having rounds in the gun, and I really don't want to shoot single stack, so I want my production. And they have this nostalgia that that's what it should be, that's what it always is. And so it's a valid critique, and they have strong opinions in that way, and I can't take away from that. So it is a good point.
So let's talk about did everyone take the survey?
I took the first one. When we started talking about this, I waited on the second two just to talk about it.
When they blocked me, I said I don't want to take the survey anymore.
Oh, Jared shaking his head. It's like the typical USPSA member. What shenanigery is going on at the national level? Whatever. Check out my my gay pride poster behind me.
I know, right? It's nice.
Jared
this was there before June and after June, mind you.
He's not gay. He's ultra gay.
So the one thing that I have about the surveys is I don't believe that. Well, let's just take about the limited 10, the L10 survey, which is one of the questions is obviously one question, should optics be allowed? One of the other questions is should this even still be a division anymore? And what was the other one? If its rule set should be tied to another division? Was that the other one?
I can't
Something
remember.
to do with red dots, wasn't it?
Red dots, if it should be tied to another division, and if it even should continue as a division anymore. And I feel like there would be a lot of people who might vote on that it should not be continue as a division, and I don't know if USPSA is willing to cut any of that stuff out. Like I'm very apprehensive to believe that any of my survey opinions will be taken seriously to what USPSA actually wants to do.
What was your initial thought on the survey answer, Tommy?
Go ahead.
Sorry.
All I'm saying is I think there's a place for limited 10 and there's a place for production and single stack and revolver in these states that have these crazy magazine capacity restrictions. And so my
answer to my retort to that, Jared, is we have a place in the rule book, and that rule book defines very clearly how we deal with those divisions in terms of recognition. If a person wants to come in and shoot L10, and they can, if there's not enough people to recognize the division, then so be it. That's the way it is. Should we take it away from them? I don't think so. I don't think so. I'm
What?
I'm less inclined to take things away from people than I am to just follow the rules that we have in place. But this idea of should we allow optics on what functionally is a single stack gun, so L10. There's a lot of folks out there who are shooting single stacks with dots on them, and to allow them to put 10 rounds in the gun and then play the major minor game that we're not playing in any other division, it could make that an interesting division.
And that, I mean, so when that idea was first brought up in the rules committee was briefed, I mean, there is a little bit of, okay, why? And then, you know, the more I thought about it, you know, at the time, there actually is some validity in having a low capacity division that is probably the closest you could get to being experimental, right? We know that L10 is basically a hider division. We know that people basically shoot L10 at major matches for whatever reason. But
Call
it's a
that
low
the Josh Zalwig effect.
no comment, sir. But I mean, so when it was discussed, so when the proposed rule set was initially discussed, the only line about optics was just yes or no, and that was the only proposed addition. It would just say optics yes, and of course people are going to say, well, what does that mean? It means you can put an optic on your gun, right? So if you wanted to put an optic on an I-core gun and come and shoot that, if you wanted to put an optic or a frame out or whatever. You know, to a certain extent, that does kind of make it an experimental division. It does sort of potentially breathe some life into division. That's really a legacy of the federal assault weapons ban and the high cap magazine ban from the 90s, right? That's the historical context of L10. Major minor, I mean, again, now you have to start thinking, well, what are the unintended consequences, right? So are you effectively going to see L10? I mean, L10 right now is basically somebody shooting a 2011 with 10 round mags. Realistically, that's what it is. Okay, so let's say you add the option for optics. Okay, so if you look at the limited optics thing and everybody's going, well, hey, you know, I want to be able to have major minor power factor scoring. Okay, well, you could come back and say, okay, well, what if we make L10, you know, keep it as is major minor, you know, functionally you could sort of experimentally test and see, hey, is this actually going to work?
So it would also be a home for all those 40 guns that nobody wants to use anymore because they're iron sights, and these old guys want to put dots on them, and so they can mill those, put a dot on it, and then compete in L10.
Well, not even mill them.
They
could frame mount the optics. They could just go to Arredondo or somewhere else and get a frame mounted optic, put it on there, and then they can go in there and play. It very much turns into IDPA's carry optics division, but with a major hit factor.
That could be fun though.
Yeah, if you see it in that light, it would be a 10-round division with any sort of dot and any sort of configuration of a firearm that would fit within the limited rule set.
Well,
I mean, in a sense, it's almost like a low cap open.
Right.
Yes.
And that's what I would think it would also do is it would give those guys again in those ban states a chance to shoot a dot division, because right now, honestly, if you're behind enemy lines and if you're trying to be good and follow the rules or whatever, you can't really compete in carry optics. You can't really compete in open. But if there was an L10 that had a dot allowed for it, then that would actually be a fun division for them.
So this was actually a discussion I had with Frank Rizzi when we were at the in-person board meeting, and I mean, everybody who's actually in the band state inherently knows that, yes, when I compete at my club matches, you know, we're basically all on the same level playing field, right? I mean, we talk about guys in Canada. In Canada, it is a hard 10-round limit. So I have IPSC, you know, guys I follow on Instagram that they're basically shooting 10-round open, and then they go to, you know, shoot an IPSC World Shoot or something like that, and they shoot to capacity. What is unique within USPSA is not so much the competitive equity in a band state, it's actually more classifiers. So if you think about a classifier, right? So a classifier for somebody that's shooting in a capacity restricted state as opposed to a non-capacity restricted state, you know, that was a more significant concern about increasing production capacity. Because if you think about the classifiers that have come out within the last couple of years, they're they're generally more high cap friendly than low cap friendly. So if I'm shooting production and now, you guys are shooting at the 15 and I am in New York and I'm shooting at 10 rounds, like there is a significant disadvantage. Now, if you were to, look at it from the perspective of, okay, the real concern is, hey, I want to be able to accurately evaluate my performance on a classifier because that is a significant part of USPSA, then that's something that you can culturally say that as we put out new classifiers, there's going to be a certain portion that should reflect more accurately what we see. But then there's also, a couple classifiers that are, cater a little bit more towards, fundamentals reloading that, the low cap guys can participate in and not feel like that they're at a disadvantage.
Just
Like, can you count?
Well,
I can't. I'm not a math Asian.
So the counter argument to then why not just address the classifiers issue instead of trying to address the divisions to make that competitive equity?
Well, that's a fair point.
I mean,
again,
like it seems like classifiers are a much more easier thing to take care of than restructuring divisions.
well, there's also a question. There's also a philosophical question of what exactly is production, right? So if you, production when it was first implemented, when Bill Wilson first came up with the idea to the USPSA board back in the mid to late 90s or something like that, it was a recognition of, hey, USPSA is more of an elitist sport, and there really isn't. There's a high barrier to entry for those people that want to participate with, just off the streets. So at that time, the USPSA board, and Bill Wilson was actually part of that board, it was mostly consisting of race gun guys, right? So you had open and limited, and it was very obvious, like, if you want to participate in USPSA, you had to basically have a custom 1911 with all the trimmings, whatever, and that was expensive. And, production in its first iteration, yeah, most people showing up at the range were going to show up with 10-round mags because that was the political environment at the time. Does that political environment still exist? Does production from a philosophical perspective still mean, hey, I'm going to show up with a gun I just bought from a dealer with the mags that came with it and be able to participate in the match? And I think the reality, the answer is, that paradigm no longer exists. Jared, when you Jared and Tom, since, they like to buy, sell, and trade like it's going out of style, you buy your guns and you get them from the FFL, they're generally coming with what, 3 mags?
Yeah.
No, I use the gun show loophole.
Hey,
yes.
And Jared doesn't care about mags. That's the police
department. Right. Jared is a protected class.
Yeah, he's a protected class, and they don't keep high inventory of what magazines are in the department. You walk in, you walk out, freshly loaded, new mags. They got gold dots in them. It's all great.
So is this the question? When it comes to production, is this really the question that is not being asked, but probably should be asked? Is, are we functionally catering to a bunch of old people who are hanging on to how it was back in Mayberry, or are we actually trying to recognize that the times and the divisions change and that the technology changes? And at this point in history, the reason why we had why we did production back then, hell, even IDPA has gone to 15-round SSP. But is the reason that we're hanging on to these things just because there's some guys who are like, I remember when I was really good shooting 10-round iron sight 9mm gun. And I don't say that. I say that with no derision. I really don't mean anything negative against that. But it feels like that's the argument that we're having. Whether it's fill up the mags, 15, whatever. Fundamentally, it does seem like there's this like, I've been around this game since forever, and I think this is how it's because that's how it's always been. Versus here's the reality of the game today. Here's if you go and you buy a production gun from Sportsman's Warehouse, does it come with 10-round magazines?
Well. The production guns that most people are buying nowadays, and I'm sure you can attest to this, Robert, and I know I can too, from the cop side, they are production guns that come with 17-round to 20-round magazines, and they have a fucking dot on them.
Yeah.
That is.
Right. Carry optics is essentially the new production.
Carry optics is essentially the new
100%.
production. This 18-round magazine will hold 18 rounds. It'll also hold 10. Also, you're competing in a sport that's going to require some level of financial investment no matter what level you come into, and 2 more magazines or 3 more magazines isn't the end of the world for most people. Whatever they do with production is fine. Like I don't hold any grudge or attitude of it. Should it say 10 or 15, whatever. I voted that I perfectly happy with it remaining in 10 rounds. The limited optics thing, sorry, the L10 optics thing makes a little bit more sense after our conversation here. But what I do feel like that's happening is like for some reason we're seeing divisions. Well, not for some reason we're seeing divisions empty it out, and it's just like it kind of looks like USPSA looks at that as a problem. That some of these divisions aren't well attended, and they want to put people in those divisions. It's just
How
like,
do you mean?
well, like production, it was very big. Like at the high end, Yee-Min, like what do you think the participation rate was in production? Like we know on this podcast right now, it went from
20 to 25%.
Okay, so one out of every quarter of the shooters, or 1 out of 5 are out there shooting production. On this podcast, it would be a 75% rate of people who shot production. Now it's a 0% rate. How many of us are still shooting USPSA? The majority of us are still shooting USPSA. We're just in another division. So why do we feel like we have to make the changes to production division to somehow inflate its numbers?
Well, I mean that discussion. I mean that really was not part of the discussion of like how can we increase participation. Some of it is a little bit of trying to right size, what production is. If you look at so I think based on the last activity participation numbers, carry optics is still 40%. Limited is somewhere around 15 to 20%. I anticipate those numbers are going to drop even further as limited optics starts to pick over. But roughly, God, I forget what it was, like roughly 30% of people who shoot limited really shoot production, right? So if you were to make production more reflective of what it was philosophically supposed to be, which is I buy an M&P or an echelon and I show up at my brand new match, the way that production is currently structured, those guys are going to basically inflate the limited numbers because what do we tell them to do? We say, hey, load up your mags. Don't worry about it. You have 3 mags. So even if you were to bump it to 15, somebody with 3 mags, can still reasonably compete in a typical club match. And then what you would probably see if we moved it to 15 rounds is that you would see a further reduction from limited. And to be fair, that's really that's really the direction of the market. I mean, what is limited? Limited is basically a 2011 shooting major. And the activity numbers that you see right now, and it's been, and Jake recognizes this, he's seen this. I mean, he does track that. He does a very good job of tracking that information, is that, limited numbers are artificially inflated because of the way that the divisions are structured. So, changing it to, trying to realign production to, be a little bit more reflective of what you see in the current market is not an attempt. I mean, again, at the end of the day, nobody was thinking like, hey, let's try to pump production numbers back up. It's really just a question of, is production in its current format, the right way to go about doing things?
I think changing both makes sense because, again, like what you talked about, if somebody just shows up with a basic bitch gun that they got from the Cabela's and then they show up and they don't have a dot on it, I'm going to tell them to go into limited. But if production was 15 rounds, I'd say shoot production. And the L10 thing makes sense. And I think the L10 thing is giving a unique option and a unique variable to people, 1, in banned states, and 2, it's giving a home to all those poor little 40s that might be getting abandoned in the near future. And so you're giving a home to a bunch of guns that are going to get abandoned, and you're increasing participation in a division that is dying. And I think both of those make sense. So if it was me, I would absolutely change production to 15 rounds, and I absolutely would do L10 to optics, because why not? Nobody shoots that division anyways.
Now, one thing to think about with the third option, and so this was a discussion, I mean, again, this is part of having the discussion from a leadership perspective where you're like, oh, I didn't really think about this. So the concept at the time is, again, with, when Tom takes his magazine out and he says, hey, this thing holds 18, right? Your typical somewhere between 17 and 19, 17 and 19 or 20. And that was the original thought process at the time. Like, hey, the variation is not going to be that much of a competitive advantage. Well, the unintended consequence, and I talked with Jared Fox about this, and then Keanu with
Counting?
the followers, Kyle or Jared
Sai?
Fox, Keanu's side, right? So okay, well, what if I take a standard magazine body and I put Keanu's followers in there, and now all of a sudden my 17 to 19 round mag becomes a 21 to a 23 round magazine, right? And so that is something that is a subtext within option 3, because there actually is some thought about that, right? It doesn't say, hey, it's a factory magazine. It just says the mag has to fit in the box. Okay, well, I put a Grams follower, I put a Rune Tactical follower, I put in a +0 base pad, aluminum base pad, brass base pad, whatever. And now you start getting into actually considering, oh, I thought we were all running 17, 19 round mags, but there's guys out there that would say, hey, let me push the envelope, and
Yeah.
now I'm running
I
22
don't like that.
rounds. But again, that was when I was explaining why we were looking at these different options in production, somebody brought that up, and I was like, that's actually a really good point. So that's the subtext in that part where you go, well, how do you actually enforce that, right?
Yep.
Because I mean, for those of us that are live for production, yes, I know what a factory follower looks like, but how many guys at Chrono know what a factory follower looks like?
Well, and to give credit where credit's due, Ben Steger said this a long time ago, and I have agreed with it. I've repeated it, and now I'm taking it over as my own. Public pressure. Yee-Min, if you and I we fly out to Area 4, and I'm running an illegal follower, and you're not, and I'm like, I'm going to get it past the Chrono guys because they don't know, but maybe one day they do. I'm more worried about what you're going to say to me, because then it's like, well, this dude's clearly cheating. Like, public pressure is going to solve that more than the threat of the Chrono guy. Because if I show up there and the Chrono guy's like, this thing's illegal, and I get bumped to open, I have to deal with that. All my friends are like, yeah, you dirty cheating bastard kind of thing.
Well,
Ben Steger's right about that.
I mean, it is. I mean, I think it is a self-correcting problem. I mean, even in 15, talking with the guys that were in on the decision back in IPSC, I mean, even for them, I think they were like, hey, 15 was just kind of a number we picked. But it's, production, I understand it, right? And to a certain extent, you're trying to have a standardized process. If you look at NASCAR, you look at Formula One, everybody basically functions within a known technological set of boundaries. Right. So, I mean, even with 15, okay, somebody below 16 or 17 or 18, right? It's generally a self-correcting problem. I mean, we are pretty
people
good at hammering each other.
Well, functionally, you want the market. You want Glock to go and figure out how to stuff more rounds into a magazine. SIG, for all of their starts and stops and missteps, in terms of putting out products that work, I mean, they're at least pushing the envelope forward and saying, here is what we can try and do. And as people try it, and we in USPSA, right, we are the single best at proofing technology. And so as shooters try it, they break it, then the companies learn more, and then they figure out how to do other great things. So I worry about like saying, well, we have to narrowly define this box. I get it, the production box. We still have to realize that we need to give enough wiggle room for companies to functionally innovate and try and come up with new ideas. And if we provide them with a good data set, then to some extent they will listen to some extent, and whether they choose to do anything, it's on them. But you're going to see Canik. If you can stuff 20 rounds into a magazine, then pretty soon, if Glock wants to be competitive and used, then they're going to try and figure that out as well.
I would say the kind of that, like, there's plenty of places where those divisions, those kind of innovation can go. And the other thing is, just to ask the question, like, sometimes you have to take the position of things you don't actually believe in just for the sake of the conversation. But like, what is so wrong with people being in limited instead of being in production? Like, I still shooting minor in limited does not seem to be the crux that we thought it was years ago, and it keeps a large field of competition for even new people for a long time. And so why do we feel like we need to have them in quote unquote the right division that they should be showing up to.
Well, I mean, everybody's going to use the example of Nils, and okay, that's great, but Nils is also, I mean,
Outlier.
he's a
Correct.
ma-
He is.
no, he's a massive outlier.
Yeah.
He's an outlier right up to the point where he proved that it could be done.
Well-
and once it proved that it could be done, then it gives
But
people the belief that
But
Let's
they can
talk.
strive to
Let's
that.
talk about the local level. The local level of
Uh-huh.
people who are going out there and shooting, and the cops who are showing up with their gear, and all that stuff is like what is so terribly wrong with keeping them in a limited pool with other shooters to strive towards, or to make gear adjustments and have that open rule set where they could make gear adjustments and then go into it.
Right.
So
Well,
I would say I know for a fact that there are a ton of cops that the reason why this probably isn't the actual reason, but the reason they tell me personally that they won't come shoot competition is like, I don't want to compete against those guys with the fancy, crazy $6,000, $7,000, $10,000 guns. All I have is this bitch ass Glock with stock sights, stock this, stock that, and that's what I want to compete with because it's my duty gun. And if they show up and they have to shoot in limited, and then Kenny Terry punches them in their throat and they die inside.
Beefbringers.com, everybody. Beefbringers.com.
Exactly. Versus if they compete in production, I think it's a different end game, and I think it's kind of like what Yee-Min was talking about earlier, what that original purpose was with production, how it was supposed to bring in the normies. It was supposed to be accessible. It was supposed to be the division for the poors, for the peasants of the group. And I think it's kind of gotten away from that, i.e., look at Robert.
No,
But
I freely admit it. I know
OG
that. I mean, this gun was
production.
but this gun was purpose built. Not obviously not the Dodd, right? But this gun was purpose built as a response to the Tanfoglio Stock 2, which was purpose built as a direct response to the Shadow.
Right.
I mean, these guns were all built to be. I mean, the Shadow was more of a competition thing, but it's still. Some of these guns are purpose built to play a game, just like, and wait for it, the Glock 34.
Yep.
Right. But
but let's look at the Echelon, right? I mean, Echelon is what retail at $600 some odd dollars. Even your Smith & Wesson M&P 2.0 aluminum. I mean, the other thing that we've been very slow to adjust to in the sport is what is like when production was first created. It was as Jared said, it's the normies for the poors. Well, now the poors can basically. And I apologize for anybody who's poor.
The amount of gun you can buy for $600 is absolutely fucking incredible.
Yeah,
it is. Yeah. It is. You go to the gun shop, take a rock, throw it through whatever glass cabinet. You get to take one gun out of there. Guess what? You're happy. You can make GM with it with enough practice. Yes. You live in America. You're healthy, and it's the best time to own a 9mm semi-automatic handgun. But yeah, it is true. But like. No matter what the crate guns that you get now, we still bastardize the rule set to allow any sort of whiz-bang geometry. Here's your gas pedal on your P320. I mean, it's
gas pedal zone.
Well, let's be honest. Okay, the gas pedal situation is the result of a rogue DNROI who just makes up whatever rules he wants. There needs to be a solution for that. I know. Cover your eyes. See no evil here.
I
get that. But the point is rather valid. I mean, when we make these rule changes and we make rule changes according to emails, that's where we actually, as an organization, get into a lot of trouble.
Yeah, well,
we shouldn't be playing that game, and that's a separate topic for another day.
I do believe that the production problem, like let's say we go to 15 rounds. 15 rounds would be great, but I do believe the main problem lies with how the guns are set up, because those same people that were telling it, show up here with your stock blaster that you just got out of Sportsman's Warehouse, and then they show up and this guy's got a P360, a P320 with a gas pedal and a tungsten frame, and is basically shooting the X5, becomes a problem.
No, it's not a problem because the X5 is going to blow up in the middle of the match.
He's just half
Frag
of
out.
it's good. Remember, the firing mechanism that separates is the part that separates from your hand. So it's only the scariest part that comes off, and the trigger guard leaves with it. So have fun, everybody. Have fun.
But that, I
But
mean,
you can
that,
just
that-
buy a new grip.
If you survive the fall, the grip's 20% off.
It's fine. No big deal. It's okay. It's okay.
It's
Está
okay.
bien.
Sometimes,
Yeah, sometimes good, sometimes shit.
sometimes
No
maybe
te
good.
preocupes.
Yeah,
Oh, you know what,
I-
Jared should be like, oh, bro, dude, I'm sorry, you rolled a 1. You could have rolled a critical 20, but you rolled a 1.
You rolled shit. I'm gonna shoot you in the knee.
yeah, and
Sorry,
so I think that's a spot where it can go. Let's talk about the limited optics questions.
Optics.
Limited optics. Let me see. I think I have that pulled up here. Survey. Let me back up here. I think I can actually take that right now. Limited optics service.
So did you join USPSA after limited optics became a professional division? No.
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 Have you competed in a match since May 1st in limited optics?
No.
Yes.
No.
Were you competing in a different division before
was
May
June.
1st? If so, what division was it? Whatever. What division was it? Did your current firearm not meet the requirements for carry optics, so you competed in an open division before May 1st? I think that is probably one of the questions that's going to get the most absolute yeses. And did you make any modifications to your carry optics approved firearm?
Oh, that's saying like, did you just throw a magwell?
Magwell.
Did you
on
throw a
it,
magwell
yeah.
on it? Yeah, for sure.
And then did you make
Good
any
questions.
Yeah, did you make any adjustments to your gear, holsters, pouches, etc. in order to compete in limited optics?
Nope.
Did you make any modifications to a limited division firearm to compete in limited optics? So that would be whatever our limited guys would be, and throwing dots on them. And did you purchase a new
Yes.
firearm to compete in limited optics? Some of us on this
Yes.
podcast would have to say yes. And then who is the manufacturer of such blaster? And
Nice try, FBI.
If you have not
Wasn't there
competed,
somebody missing from that list?
Funny if there was Atlas, Akai, Brazos, Bull Armory, Canic, CK Arms, CZ, Glock, Infinity.
Is Infinity? Oh, Infinity's on the list. There we go.
yeah, Infinity Firearms is
Funny
still
because
there.
those guys are like the ones who sold out the Second Amendment. Huh.
I don't know what you're talking about, sir.
I know nothing either.
If you have not
They are
competed in
they
limited
blue, red,
optics,
white, and blue.
if you have not competed in limited
Yeah,
optics, would you if the scoring was major minor? And the last question is, if you competed in limited optics, do you think that the scoring should remain minor only, or do you think that the scoring should be major minor, same as limited division?
Okay, that's actually a really interesting question, because if you take limited or L10 and then let that be kind of the play around division, but you leave the major minor component in there, although functionally, if you really think about it, it'll always just be a major division in L10, but it would allow people to play in that division.
It would allow people to move
with
their
a slide
guns
right
over.
optic.
Well, the other part
What's
is
that?
too. It's like I do not understand not letting the rule set in a provisional division be as open as possible to sort out what works and what doesn't work, because it's harder to change later. So why don't we make it major minor at the start and see what happens?
Because as we've learned through this podcast and through many years,
They all
it
become
is very
divisions.
difficult to take things away.
Yeah.
The primary reason for that is if you take a look at the 40 market, let's just be honest, major power factor is basically 40.
Yeah.
If you look at the manufacturers that would most likely be involved in USPSA activities, their market percentage as far as major 40 is concerned is in the single digits.
Yep.
Like somewhere
Wow.
between 1 and 3%. There was a major manufacturer who was like, dude, like I think 3 to 4% of our demand. I mean, we're talking an actual major manufacturer, something like 3% of their market is in 40. Even the custom
Isn't that
gun
why
manufacturer.
Staccato got out of 40? Because they're just like, we don't.
Staccato only
sell.
builds 40 guns on order, and they have to be special orders. You know, some of the other manufacturers I spoke to, just again, the very informal survey, it was yeah, we basically don't build it unless somebody specifically asks us to, and we don't have it on our website or anything like that as an option. So you're basically talking 1 to 3% of demand is even in 40. And the other consideration at the time was that, okay, well, we're
Well,
still futzing around with optics survivability with 9 mil, right? So
yeah. Well, and
then
the
you
other thing
talk.
is, manufacturers want nothing to do with 9 major. They don't want
Why
In
that.
its
not?
in its current format, yeah. But I mean, even if you were to look at major recoil impulse
Why is it spicy?
even if you were to look at major recoil impulse on a slide mounted optic, I mean, geez, the Scar 17s were just absolutely, disastrous with the recoil impulse, and that's 7.62. So you're talking about 40 major recoil impulse. So then you actually start looking at, what's available out there. I mean, I think, what is it? The SIG R2 is the only optic out there that could conceivably hold up to major power factor.
Right, but I mean the counterpoint to that was when Carry Optics came on the scene. Most optics couldn't handle a 9mm.
Right.
Yeah.
Now the counterpoint to all that though is what I always keep coming back to. If we're going to create a new division today, should we be trying to hang on to relics of the past? Right? Like there's no reason to bring 40 to bring major into this thing because it's just not viable anymore. Like all the data
40,
says that
40
all the
in
data
major.
says 40,
Or,
45
yeah, major and 40, yeah.
is functionally there when it comes to shootings. To stop a bad guy from doing bad guy things, everybody gets 3 no matter the caliber, functionally.
Well, the other part is too is like
my stopping power.
My stopping power. Okay, Grandpa, go back to your desk and keep filling out forms.
That's what the rifle is for, sir.
yeah.
Don't make me order more things from the CMP, you youngins.
I sporterize this and I know what I got.
Oh, God.
There'll be big holes in you, and they were even bigger holes when people were half the size. Remember when people weren't fat and they still got shot with 45? Those were the days. I would say like the one thing that I kind of missed in the surveys was the questions about limited. I'm not here to change limited as a sport. I do not shoot limited, but I would imagine that there's an argument to be made about removing the 40 caliber diameter rule set at a limited there, and also see what the response would be for everybody else.
I do not want to see that happen.
Wait.
I think limited has a unique place, and
Well, once again, we're like
take 40 Smith and Wesson. About
hanging on to dead things. I mean, if we
no, I get it, but the division exists. Okay, that division exists. It's a solid division. If it's gonna die, it'll die naturally. We don't go in there and start messing with it to try and kill it.
Which
is what they did to production in a lot of ways.
Correct, but what I would say is that if there is a division that is very robust into caliber changes, it's all the guys running the 2011s that could easily swap into 9 major guns or shooting 9mm guns in a similar platform.
So you're espousing 9 major for limited?
9 major if you do limited, or even just have
That's a spicy.
That's a spicy meatball.
Oh,
that's
a big boom boom stick.
Yeah, if you could mess around with it. And I think that if we're gonna have the questions in kind of have that open playing field, if we want to move people into production, we can also look at a way that we can keep people in limited. But I think 15 rounds. I think 15 rounds is probably a good way. I think you guys have convinced me on the 15 rounds to move people in there. Yeah, I think that would be productive.
I mean, historically, limited came into being so that you could have a non-optics division. Because limited was the second division that was created, and it's basically at an equilibrium point. Limited is basically a 2011 shooting 40 in major.
Yep.
I mean, are we just at a turning point in gun technology where we are functionally going from this agrarian culture to the industrial age, and you have people that are just desperately trying to hang on to the old ways? because that's always worked, and with iron sights.
I really see USPSA as not ever hanging on to the old ways ever. I mean, we have been very progressive in moving the divisions along very quickly. I mean, open
Right.
stays with it. Limited has pretty much had a.
They seem to be racist against the Chinese.
You guys continue your discussion. I'll be right back.
I don't know. It's interesting because I mean that's what a lot of these.
Sir, I am not
shit.
Chinese.
Oh shit!
I
just got that.
Come on, that was a good joke. You guys didn't
It's
laugh.
a good joke now.
You bastards.
I only look Chinese. Thank you very much.
I mean, that actually does bring up a point. What is the makeup of the board members? Old white
people.
guys. And they ran out the one minority. Something to be said. Just throwing that out there. Yee-Min's like, I now officially disavow this. No, it is sort of funny that the USPSA is good about like embracing the technology. Blanton talks about this all the time, that the technology is being pushed forward, and carry optics is the thing that really, really showed me how influential practical shooting and USPSA shooters are on the market in terms of proofing out concepts. And yet we still have this core group of people that you have the 1911 guys, my 45, and then you have the production guys who are like, I think 10 rounds is the only way to go. And they're clinging on to these ideas. And so, and I don't know. I mean, because like on one hand, I'm like, I don't want to go and destroy it. I don't want to destroy a division of something that was working in the division. But if what that division was doing is no longer working, is it worth having a conversation of how do we tweak or modify the division to make it work again? And then the second question underneath that, which is the hard one, is can we actually do anything to make that division come back? Or is it just whistling past the graveyard? I don't know the answer to that.
Well, I mean, the one thing that was honestly never discussed is, well, what exactly is considered a division that's viable, right? So single stack and revolver, to a certain extent, it's a unique division, right? Even if the participation is virtually non-existent. I mean, even when we set the activity participation rate at 5%, that was basically looking at single stack and going, okay, that's a pretty stable floor. If limited optics can at least perform at the stability of single stack, then that should at least demonstrate some viability.
Right.
And I mean, it ultimately, it really is at the end of the day a good faith effort to try to reach out to the membership and say, hey, this is something that we're considering. We'd like your input. Now, it's definitely a little bit better presented than perhaps the survey questions were at the end of November, December. But the discussion that really should happen is something along these lines, where it's like, look, this is why, this is what we were thinking, this is what the organization is trying to wrestle with, and then here's some of the nuances.
Mm-hmm. Do you think that they'll actually post the survey results? I don't remember what they did. Okay,
they
I
did.
was wondering about that.
Survey results were collated prior to the in-person board meeting, and then once they were cleaned up in a manner that could be presented to the membership, it's done so, and I expect to see the same with these survey results.
Oh, nice.
So just a thought before we take off about this is
there's a couple questions if you want to go through them. I asked if anybody had any questions about it.
All right, yeah, we'll go through the questions here. I feel very much that we need to keep in the mindset that this is not gunfighting, that this isn't like have room for any gun that you carry. Like, this is a game, and the main thing is we have to keep it a competitive and fair game, and not be worried about what can we cram into the sport to keep up with the latest technologies. I think there's always should be some place for that, and then there should be definitely a place for a limited set of rule sets that are very restrictive, because some people find enjoyment out of that, taking limited equipment to the edge. I mean, Cowboy action does not have to worry about the increasing level of technology that enters it, but they still have a fun time in shooting the game.
I'll start reading some questions here. From Chris Loki.
Wait. Are we supposed to do like ads, like dominate defense,
Oh, you want to do the
long
ads?
shadow holsters?
Yeah, PARA10.
Ooh.
Go to any website on the internet, type in PARA10. If it gives you 10% off, they're sponsored. If they don't, screw them. We never like this anyway.
Don't buy from them anymore.
Dominate
Mainly
defense.
go to beefbringers.com.
Beefbringers.com.
If your law enforcement want to shoot gooder in Utah, go to Waypoint Trading.
Yay.
It's just on Instagram. It's just on Instagram. By the way, I did commission my daughter for a new PARAcast logo for her shirts and a beefbringers.com logo. So those
I am
might be.
so glad. I am so glad we bought that domain.
I didn't. No, that's inappropriate. I shouldn't say that.
Well,
But
just.
you're going to anyway.
But what were you going to say if you were going to say it?
If I was gonna say it, I was gonna say you're gonna pay your daughter to draw pictures of dicks.
I think for her, whatever. If it's legal tender, it's legal tender. Just move
Listen,
on. She lives on her own.
beefbringers.com. If that logo doesn't have a dong
Listen,
on it, I'm
I
gonna
told
be
her.
sad.
I told her this. I left her a voice message. I said, I need 2 logos. I need one of a man standing with his fist down in a fighting pose with a hat and a beard, and a banner underneath that says beefbringers.com, and then it says, we'll fight any 15-year-old, any place, anytime. That's all I need
And he
underneath
needs
it.
a massive erection.
Well, hopefully
Oh
the
my
banner.
God.
Hopefully the banner will be covering that. But anyways.
Oh my God! Eat your heart out, David Blanton. This is a professionally conducted podcast.
The best.
Yeah.
The best. Brought to you by Chevy. Get the new Chevy Tahoe. Anyways, go ahead.
Yee-Min, how do you see the events that transpired reshaping the future of the organization?
Wow, that's not. I saw that question. It's a little bit of a loaded question. I mean, I think the reality is, it depends. It really depends on if it creates enough of a critical mass for the membership to, really take a hard look at, how the organization functions, how it operates, and asking the questions. The reality is that USPSA, and the way that it's structured, the way that it functions, for most people at a club match, they can just show up and shoot. And what occurs at the highest levels is not really something that substantially impacts their ability to participate at this point, a discretionary income type sport. I mean, SLPSA, you guys have been getting a lot of folks showing up at your matches, and you probably have 20, 30 at most that might actually be aware of what's going on at the higher levels, and most people are just like, hey, I get to shoot on a Saturday.
Correct.
Right.
But I will say what happened. You definitely recruited more people into the idea of what was going on.
Yeah, unless Robert's there and he forces everyone at my match to sign a petition to support you.
You will shut
Robert,
up and
you're
you
supposed
will
to
let
be
me do
doing
what I want.
check-in. Hey, are you a USPSA member? I think we
was
should
doing
talk about
check-in.
this.
Yeah,
Robert,
I was checking people. I was checking
focus.
people in to sign my thing.
But
You shut up, or I won't help you again.
The People's Liberation Army of Yee-Min appreciates your service to the Empire.
I got banned for you, so be happy.
I love you. I'm just saying. I mean,
that makes it all worth it.
Yeah,
let's see.
it's literally on any social media, your name has literally become Voldemort. Like he should not be mentioned. It's just like
say it.
Yeah,
Don't you
it's
say it.
pretty interesting. But the one thing else I will say is everyone will be quite aware of what to do with their RO certifications. And the possible attacks to them if they find themselves on the edge of agreeing with the majority of the board.
You whisper Yee-Min Lin into the practice score app 3 times while turning around, your certifications automatically get revoked.
Let's see, from Dirk Hopkins, is another equipment change really needed? How many people are shooting the proposed divisions that could possibly be changed?
There.
I do not see a major shift. And the other the argument that we made that made the most logical sense on this podcast was taking new shooters and pushing them into production. I do not know if there are experienced shooters now that already have the equipment set that will migrate into production. It kind of seems like it's turning into IKEA's daycare, where you show up and we go, baby section this way, here's your 3 mags and your gun. Hey, we made it just for you. I mean, I'm not
meatball.
Have
Yes.
meatball, babyface.
Meatballs and the what's that Swedish
Horse.
jelly fruit?
Have horse meatball with
Oh,
Lincolnberry.
and the
It's good.
Lincolnberry.
shittiest. Listen, IKEA, like your food's all right. It's great. It's great value, but I don't want your trash soda. Okay, I want Coca-Cola. I want Dr. Pepper. I want Sprite. I don't want. Oh,
No.
this is our off-brand Swedish cola. No, no. Okay. Marlboros and Newports. That's what I want out of that vending machine. As far as L10, I do not see people going like, now here's the time for me to get that 45 optics ready 1911. I think it will be a more kind of fun screw around place, but I do not think it'll drive the participation that limited optics or something else. You can tell by the questions in limited optics that we are in the conversations held on this podcast and other places. People are moving into that division willingly. Production, I feel like you will have the two ends of the spectrum, guys who are very happy to go into production and guys who are brand new. So you might see the skill gap in that division be as if Moses just walked through it.
Connor Williams, would increasing the round count of production to 15 and making optics an option breathe some life into that division?
I believe the optics would.
The optics would. Well, okay. So when limited optics was first discussed, part of at least the vision that I saw was being able to actually create a true separation between what we see carry optics as it is now and where carry optics could potentially be. And so part of the other rationale behind keeping limited optics in minor was that, okay, at some point limited optics becomes a true viable division. It's a permanent division, and then we could potentially look at carry optics, go, hey, why don't we try to right size or realign carry optics into what it was originally intended to be. Of course, I get it. That's probably heresy, but you could try to dial back carry optics into more of a production optics format that says
10 rounds in the weight. Was it basically
no,
the original?
not right, but not so much the 10 rounds. I mean, obviously the capacity thing was a big driver in terms of increasing carry optics, but then something along the lines of hey, your crazy slide stop or whatever, right? Like a true production-based gun that just has a dot on it. So then, rather than
A
changing
carry
production,
gun, if you will.
well, there's people that carry Atlases in 2011. So, I have to talk to Phil Schrader about that. I'm not exactly quite sure what the logic was behind calling it carry optics, but essentially, limited optics would be the, hey, this is everything you can do to a gun with a slide mounted dot on it, with the exception of putting a cup, and who knows where that's going to be in a couple of years. And then for everybody else, carry / production optics.
Yep. Well, I will find that the argument of what people carry and what's a self-defense pistol, thank you, Staccato, has completely gone out the window.
Yeah.
It is somehow their little slippery hands got into the law enforcement market, and they told people who are on government budgets and government income.
That's what happens when you hire prostitutes and grease the skids.
Well, listen, when the
You get money, you get buckets and buckets of money.
You know that law enforcement has kind of changed from right about when the hooker's about to perform the sex act, they go, bam, gotcha, I'm a cop, to, no, let them perform the sex act and then come back 3 other days, let them do it again. So this way we really got them. And then after you finally had your after you're in your refractory period, you can go like, oh baby, thanks. Also, baby, you're busted. Here's the badge.
You gotta find out if the other people in the store will also do this. You don't want to just bust one person when you could bust
No, you
10.
gotta take down the entire organization.
And if they'll give you a handy, why don't find out if they'll do more? And then we
Stop.
gotta test that out on every single person. This is very reasonable.
Stopping criminal enterprises one-hand job at a time. Salt Lake City PD, everybody. Technically, Robert Kraft was just doing his work as a citizen.
Yeah. How much nut Do you really need?
All right. What was the question that we were talking about?
Oh God, professional.
Oh my gosh. Let's see from Marcel. I want to chat about all the corruption, but to focus on the equipment stuff. And he wrote a paragraph. He says, historically, there's been a diversion to changing divisions by restricting them through concern over the costs already incurred by members to be part of the division. How do you see USPSA shaping division changes in a manner that funnels those people into new divisions where the stuff isn't illegal, while also taking us back to some of the more restricted divisions? Do you think that rather than restricting production back to truly stock guns is a better path than funneling low cap into a new proper low cap division, one that includes major minor? With the efforts to bring major power factor down, do you think it's time to split open major from limited major? Do you think major power factor has a place in USPS in the future, that it is fueled purely by niche calipers that and only exist for 45 ACP to compete against 9mm?
What?
Marcel, I love you, but holy cow, that was a dissertation.
I would say
I think you can sum it up by saying instead of, like, what if we just create divisions that incentivize people to move to them rather than trying to take shit away from people?
Well, I think that's the argument, is that the whole conversation has been trying to get people to move into and have a place for these people to move into. The other question about taking equipment away, I find it very easy to take a gun that I currently own and put it in a stock configuration to go play in some other sport. And when you buy a new gun, it's in the stock configuration. So if that's allowed, then it's pretty easy to move into those sports. The taking away or minimizing a division that's already existing is kind of a
My
different...
gun's not stock anymore.
Yeah, but it still plays in the division which it's allowed to. I mean, you could...
100%. No, I know.
I mean, you could do it. So I just don't know if this will drive anybody to it. I mean, like literally having like a low cap, low weight, and optics ready 10-round division, that is nuts enough that I would participate in it, but I'm a very weird person.
You would put a dot on your HK-45 and just start slinging it. You'd
Yes,
be the
I would.
happiest little clam
Yes,
I've
I
ever seen in
would.
my life.
And then I would literally be like, no one shoot. No one shoot. I shot 27 rounds. Let me get my brass.
I can get a Mark
Brass.
23 and compete with it.
Tommy, as everybody who's ever shot a 45 at a match can attest to, when you shoot 45, the squad shoots 45.
Yep. They'll pick that up.
And see, that's why I like small pistol primer, because then I'm like, joke's on you, bastard. You pick it up, you're like, ugh, I'll put that back down. Robert, you can have this brass back. I'm smart. SMRT. From Andy Erickson. Why does L10 still exist? The rule limiting capacity to the legal limit in a given state takes care of it. Why try to get people to shoot a division almost no one shoots? I say this as someone who doesn't think revolver needs to go, just L10.
Well, correct me if I'm wrong.
It's a historical thing.
Well, it's really for the people who lived in those magazine capacity limited states to compete in states that did not have the limited magazine capacity. So
okay, so here's the question then. Okay, if a lot of there's a certain court case that's going through, it's in the assault weapons and the magazine capacity. If that goes through and it's shown to be unconstitutional, per the Bruin decision, does that then negate the idea of hanging on to an L10 division, for states that used to, back in the olden days, have a restriction, but now are no longer restricted?
Well, I think the L10 division...
we have to cross that bridge, right?
Well, we kind of don't have to have crossed that bridge, because the L10 division is, one, it should go or stay...
production.
They should only go or stay based on the way that they act inside the game that we're playing. The outside effects shouldn't really have an effect on those, because it's just... If they're not participating and they're not playing, then they don't need to exist, and then the rule covers it whether it does or doesn't, as far as like the politics of what magazine capacity should be. I do not think we should look for outside resources to curtail our divisions. I think we should let the game decide what goes and what stays.
Except L10 and production came into existence because of external legal reasons.
They did, but when those reasons constricted it, but when those reasons open up, that doesn't mean that those divisions open up anyway. I mean,
yeah, but it negates the primary reason for having that division in the first place.
well, it's kind of like a racetrack. It's just like, well, we can't race on the streets. The government has said, listen, no more 15-year-olds flying across the street and turning into hamburger. We build a racetrack. Guess what? We now can race on the street. Well, we still like the racetrack. The racetrack is good. It works for us. We'll keep the racetrack.
But fundamentally, that racetrack slowly starts to go away, which is exactly what happens.
Yeah, but then the answer is build another racetrack, not just go race on the streets.
I like hamburgers.
Who doesn't like hamburgers?
You like beef? What was it? Beef what?
I
Beef
smell
fingers.
like beef.
Beef Wellington is his full God-given name.
Last question. What do you think about restricting divisions to levels, i.e., 30 different divisions allowed at L1s, whatever floats the boat, but maybe only 5 that are allowed at L2s, stuff like that?
Yee-Min?
That sounds like a logistical nightmare.
It kind of does, doesn't it?
I mean,
Well, and how
Just-
would you
just-
classify people?
Oh,
And then on top
Yeah.
of that, I feel like you would have even more problems with the trophy hunters. Then you're going to play this game where everyone's going to be like, wait, what division is Robert shooting? I will not shoot in that division. Oh, Tom? No, he's not competition. We don't have to worry about him. We can shoot. We can do this. We can do this. And then you have these guys rotating through and trying to shoot in this division or that division and changing divisions at the last Senate. I don't know. That sounds weird.
it does sound a little bit.
I didn't mean it, Tom.
Oh, I'm well aware. I've beaten you plenty. Yeah, there is some fun thought experiments that you could have of literally taking the scores from 2 separate divisions that are similarly put out like single stack and L10, and smushing them together, and then coming out with something like that. But it's not feasible as far as a match, running a match and putting those together and trophying and all that stuff like that. So it's just, I think we make prod 15 rounds. We make L10. You put optics on there, and we see where he goes. And I suspect we'll have a very minimal change. So,
All right.
well, that's it. Thanks for downloading, listening, subscribing. Thanks for checking out the visual podcast on YouTube. Thanks for joining us at all times of the week and all days and whatnot. We really appreciate your guys' support. For Robert Wyatt, Yee-Min Lin, and Jared Stapp, I'm Tom Nelson, bidding you peace, love, and soul as we depart into the open waters of the sea of life on a little tugboat we like to call the PARAcast.
Good night, everybody.
Dude.
For the Empire.